The sound that shattered Khaled's world wasn't the first explosion he'd ever heard, but it was the one that marked the end of his childhood. It came on a Monday morning in Aleppo, Syria, just after his mother had handed him a piece of flatbread and kissed his forehead. The sun hadn't fully climbed the sky and his father was humming to himself while sweeping outside their small barbershop, just a few meters down from the front door. Khaled had been lacing up his dusty sneakers, thinking about school, thinking about football with the neighborhood kids, thinking about nothing in particular, the way 9-year-olds do. And then came the roar. The kind of noise that doesn't just hit your ears, but your bones. It was less a sound, more a presence, an uninvited god descending from the sky with fire in its breath. There was no time to scream, no time to run, the air filled with dust and metal. Then silence, thick, terrifying silence. When Khaled opened his eyes, he was under something, debris, maybe part of a wall or the ceiling. His leg throbbed, his mouth tasted of concrete and blood. He didn't see his mother, he didn't see his father, just shapes moving in the haze. And then came the crying. Not his, but someone else's. A baby? A woman? He couldn't tell. That day, everything changed. They later learned the missile had landed near the market street, tearing apart 2 buildings. Their home was cracked open like a ripe fruit, and their father, his body was never found. His mother, wounded but conscious, dug Khaled out with her bare hands, sobbing in Arabic and whispering in English, "You're okay. You're okay." Words she had taught him once like a lullaby. Words she kept saying even when they both knew he wasn't. In the weeks that followed, they became part of that endless tide of faces moving westward, away from smoke, away from home, toward the promise of something less terrifying. They crossed checkpoints, walked for days, shared bread with strangers. They slept under plastic tarps. Once they paid a man to sneak them in the back of a vegetable truck to avoid a militia patrol. Khaled stopped asking where they were going. The answer was always the same. Somewhere safe. Eventually they arrived at a refugee camp in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. It was a world of endless tents, water buckets and dust. In this limbo of survival, time seemed to stretch and contract at will. Morning, afternoon and night lost meaning. Food came from aid trucks. Smiles were scarce. Khaled, now 10, rarely spoke. He stopped playing. His leg had healed, but not his spirit. His mother, ever resourceful, took small jobs, cleaning tents, helping older women read UN documents. One afternoon, she returned to their corner of the camp holding a small miracle, a used smartphone with a cracked screen. "For you," she said, pressing it into Khaled's hands, "so you can learn." He didn't ask how she got it. He just nodded and sat with it on his lap as if it might break from his breath alone. With no SIM card and barely any charge, the phone became a portal to another reality. The camp had one shared Wi-Fi point, slow and temperamental, but enough. Khaled used it first to listen to English words, then to play simple games. Then one evening, while scrolling through videos suggested by the algorithm, he stumbled upon something different. It started with a grainy image of a tall man in a green jersey. A name appeared, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Khaled didn't know who that was. He clicked. The video played with dramatic music. It told the story of a boy from Nigeria, raised in Greece, who once sold sunglasses in the street to help feed his family. The boy had grown tall, impossibly tall, and learned to play basketball. Not just play, but dominate. He made it to the NBA, became an MVP, a champion. Khaled watched it 3 times in a row. The 4th time, he cried. Something about Giannis struck him, something beyond the stats or the highlights. It was the way he spoke in interviews, softly, honestly, the way he hugged his brothers when he was drafted, the way he said, "Never be afraid to fail." Giannis wasn't born into riches. He had known hunger, he had carried fear, but he kept moving, kept believing. Khaled looked down at his own arms, thin, scarred, then at the ground, a patch of dirt where other boys sometimes kicked a deflated football. He didn't know the rules of basketball, but something in him whispered, "Try." The next morning, Khaled took a bundle of old clothes, wrapped them into a makeshift ball, and began throwing it at a metal bucket nailed sideways onto a wooden post. The first 50 shots missed, the next 50 too. But the 101st, it made a hollow sound like music. He smiled for the first time in weeks. From that day on, his ritual began. Wake up, help his mother, eat if there was food, then practice. Every day. No real ball, no real hoop, no real shoes. Just repetition, movement, hope. He watched every video of Giannis he could find. He mimicked the way he dribbled, the way he pivoted. Even though Khaled didn't have a real ball or space to run, he drew a court in the dirt with a stick, named it Milwaukee. He started whispering to himself before sleep, "If he can do it, maybe I can too." There were days when the cold bit through the tent walls and the rain turned the ground into sludge. Days when kids mocked him. Days when his mother coughed so hard it scared him. But the thought of Giannis selling trinkets in Athens, training in the dark, lifting trophies years later, kept Khaled steady. In time, others began to notice. A volunteer aid worker saw him practicing and gave him a real basketball. Another helped him find old sneakers that were 3 sizes too big. He wore them anyway. They felt like a future. But it wasn't just the sport. Giannis's story gave him something rarer. Permission. Permission to believe in a life beyond the perimeter of the camp. To imagine himself not as a victim, but as someone in motion, someone with agency. At night, when his mother asked if he was okay, he'd nod, but then he'd ask, "Do you think I'll ever meet him?" She would smile, stroke his hair, and say the same thing every time. "You never know, Habibi. The world is big, but hope is bigger." And Khaled would close his eyes, clutching his old phone, Giannis's voice echoing in his ears like a prayer. He didn't know what tomorrow held. He didn't know where they'd be, or if they'd ever leave this patch of dust and waiting. But he knew one thing: he would keep practicing, keep dreaming, keep watching those videos until the images burned into his soul. Because sometimes, in the middle of war and displacement, all a boy needs to survive is to believe that someone, somewhere, made it out, and that maybe, just maybe, he could too. In the faded corners of his memory, Khaled would often return to that dirt court he once called Milwaukee. He could still hear the bounce of the donated ball, feel the uneven rhythm of his breath in the cold air of the Beaker Valley. But by the time he turned 14, the court and the camp were behind him. Germany was nothing like Lebanon, nothing like Syria. The air was clean and cold, and the silence was a different kind, less haunted, more indifferent. When Khaled and his mother arrived in Munich through a refugee resettlement program, they stepped into a city that moved with speed and structure. Everything was precise. The trams on time, the doors automated, the schools expecting paperwork they didn't have. At first it overwhelmed him. They were placed in a temporary housing facility, a narrow apartment block filled with other families, some from Eritrea, some from Ukraine, a few from Afghanistan. His mother, always the quiet engine of their survival, found work cleaning offices at night and studied German during the day. Khaled was enrolled in a local school with an integration program. He sat at the back of the classroom, absorbing words he didn't fully understand, drawing basketballs in the margins of his notebook. For weeks he said almost nothing. He missed the noise of the camp, the smell of his mother's lentil soup cooked over a makeshift stove, even the plastic chairs lined in rows under the community tent. Here, everything was new. The language, the rules, the way people looked at him with polite hesitation. But the first time he saw the school's basketball court, his body remembered. The long stretch of polished wood, the actual hoops with nets, the lines on the floor. These were sacred to him. A few boys were shooting around during recess, laughing, teasing each other in fast, fluent German. Khaled stood at the edge, watching. One of the boys noticed him and waved. "You play?" the boy asked, gesturing to the ball. Khaled nodded, then hesitated. He hadn't touched a ball in weeks. The boy tossed it to him. Khaled caught it instinctively. The weight was right, the grip. He took a breath, stepped forward, and pulled up for a jump shot. The ball arced cleanly, kissed the backboard, and dropped through the net. They all looked at him. He looked at the rim, the ball, then at them, and smiled. Just a little. From that day, something shifted. The boys let him in. Not fully. He was still the refugee kid, still foreign. But on the court, none of that mattered. He moved with grace and control, mimicking every move he had studied from hours of Giannis highlights. He copied the Euro step, practiced spin moves, and began to build his own style. Less powerful than Giannis, but clever, unafraid. A teacher noticed his talent and recommended him for the school team. Khaled hesitated, unsure whether he deserved that place, whether the invitation was real. But the coach, an older man named Herr Vogel, welcomed him with quiet sincerity. "You play with heart," he told Khaled in slow English. "That's what matters." Khaled started going to every practice early, staying late. He ran drills with relentless intensity. When the coach asked him to write down the name of his favorite player, he wrote in all caps, Giannis. At night, in their small apartment, he'd replay Bucks games on a borrowed tablet. He still didn't have much, just 2 pairs of clothes, worn sneakers, and a wall covered in pictures of Giannis taped together from printed screenshots. But it was enough. His German improved, his grades stabilized, and his bond with Giannis grew into something spiritual. For a class assignment, the students were told to write an essay titled, "Who is your hero?" Most kids chose their parents or historical figures. Khaled wrote 12 pages about Giannis Antetokounmpo, his childhood in Sepolia, the racism he faced, the love between the Antetokounmpo brothers, the MVP speeches that made grown men cry. "I don't want to be him," Khaled wrote in closing. "I want to meet him, to tell him that he saved me even though he doesn't know my name." The teacher cried when she read it. She showed it to the principal, who showed it to a local journalist doing a piece on refugee youth. The article was published under the headline, "The Boy Who Learned to Dream in Giannis's Shoes." The story caught attention, first from readers in Munich, then from sports non-profits across Europe. One of them, a youth basketball foundation based in Athens, reached out with a proposal. They wanted to invite Khaled to a summer program for refugee athletes, a 2-week camp, training, games, and a visit to the neighborhoods where Giannis grew up. When Khaled's mother told him, he sat in stunned silence. "Athens?" he asked. "Where Giannis lived?" She nodded. "You're going." When they landed in Greece, the summer heat hit him like a memory. The camp was held on the outskirts of the city, an old gymnasium, sleeping quarters for 50 boys and girls, and a court painted with murals of players who had defied odds. There were drills in the morning, games in the afternoon, team-building exercises in the evenings. Khaled thrived. He wasn't the best player, not yet, but he was the one everyone noticed. The one who didn't give up on plays, the one who helped others off the floor. Midway through the camp, the organizers took the group on a walking tour through Sepolia, the neighborhood where Giannis had grown up. They passed the corner markets, the narrow stairways, the basketball courts with cracked pavement. When they reached the school where Giannis had gone, Khaled stopped and stared. This was it. This was where it started. He knelt down and touched the concrete. The moment felt electric. One of the camp volunteers, a documentary filmmaker named Demos, had been filming the group for a project. He noticed Khaled's reaction and asked him to share his story. Khaled was hesitant, but eventually agreed. He spoke about Aleppo, about the camp in Lebanon, about that old phone and the video that changed everything. Demos was moved. He filmed more interviews, then footage of Khaled playing, training, laughing with his teammates. There was something raw and powerful in his presence. Back in Germany, after the summer ended, Khaled returned with new fire. His coach saw the transformation and gave him more responsibility on the court. Khaled began mentoring younger players. He became more confident in class. He started studying English again, not because he had to, but because it was the language Giannis spoke in every interview, the language of the NBA. Demos continued to check in, occasionally sending clips of the footage he was editing. He had an idea, he said, a short film about Khaled's journey. He wanted to pitch it to sports networks, to NGOs, maybe even the NBA. Khaled didn't think much would come of it, but he allowed it, trusted him. Months passed. Khaled turned 16. He grew taller, stronger. His game sharpened. He began to win awards in regional youth tournaments. Coaches from other cities started to notice him. A representative from a youth development program in Berlin offered him a partial scholarship. But he still whispered the same thing before every game under his breath like a ritual. "Thank you, Giannis." Then, one evening, he came home from practice to find his mother staring at her phone in disbelief. Her eyes were full of tears. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed. She held the phone out to him. It was an email. Subject: NBA All-World Youth Feature. Invitation to Milwaukee. He read it 3 times. They were inviting him to the United States to attend a game, to be honored as part of a new initiative recognizing young athletes overcoming adversity. The trip would be filmed. He would be introduced at halftime, and, though not officially stated, there were hints that someone very special would be there. His hands trembled. That night Khaled couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, then at the old photos still taped to his wall. Giannis holding the MVP trophy. Giannis hugging his mother. Giannis saying, "This is for my people." Was he ready for this? He didn't know, but he knew he'd been walking toward it for years. And if Giannis had taught him anything, it was this: sometimes you don't see the leap you're making until your feet leave the ground. The sky over Milwaukee was grayer than Khaled expected. It wasn't the brightness or warmth he'd always associated with the NBA, those glittering arenas, dazzling lights, roaring crowds. Instead, it was quiet, heavy with clouds. The city stretched low across the horizon as the shuttle rolled toward downtown, the skyline blinking through fogged windows. But to Khaled, it might as well have been Olympus. He pressed his forehead against the glass, watching signs pass in English, watching cars and buildings he had only seen in highlight reels and online interviews. Each turn of the road sent a jolt through his chest. He wasn't sure how he had gotten here, not really. One minute he was training on cracked courts in Germany, then came the invitation, the camera crew, the visa, the flight across the ocean. Now here he was, riding toward the Fiserv Forum, heart hammering like a war drum. He clutched a small notebook in his lap. It was frayed and bent at the corners, filled with pages of notes, sketches of Giannis, quotes he had copied by hand. He flipped it open to the first page, his own handwriting shaky and crooked from when he was 10. If he can do it, maybe I can too. His mother sat beside him, silent, her hand gently on his arm. She hadn't said much since they landed in the US. She didn't need to. Her eyes said enough. Pride, fear, awe. She had held him through war, through loss, through exile. Now she was watching him rise into something new, something neither of them had dared to imagine aloud. The arena loomed large as they pulled up. A curved shell of glass and steel, its banners fluttering with images of Bucks players in motion. And there, huge, unmistakable, was Giannis, arms crossed, eyes forward, towering across a mural as if watching over the city. Khaled stared. "Ready?" one of the organizers asked. He nodded, but his body didn't feel ready. His limbs tingled, his stomach was a pit. He had dreamed of this for years, visualized it in his mind in 100 different versions, but now that it was real, he felt like a child again, small, lost, undeserving. They led him through service corridors and security checkpoints. The Fiserv Forum smelled of popcorn and polish, of cold air and adrenaline. He could hear the echo of basketballs, the faint beat of warm-up music thudding through the walls. A staffer handed him a lanyard with his name and the word honoree in bold print. He stared at it, at his name, printed, official. The film crew was already set up. Dimos was there, camera in hand, grinning wide. "You made it, brother," he said. Khaled smiled faintly. "I still think I'm dreaming." "No dream," Dimos said, "but dreams brought you here." In the hours before the game, Khaled was given a tour. He walked the halls lined with photographs of past players, stepped onto the practice court, shook hands with coaches and trainers. Everyone was kind, respectful, curious. But his mind was elsewhere, always looping the same thought: will I see him? Will he see me? When he was led to his seat courtside for the start of the game, he almost couldn't breathe. The arena was alive, pulsing with energy, fans cheering, lights flashing. The players ran out to fireworks and hip-hop. The announcer's voice boomed. And there, towering over everyone, came Giannis. Khaled froze. Even from across the court, he felt it. That presence. The same strength. The same poise. But real. No screen. No buffering. No distance. Giannis jogged past the bench, slapped hands with teammates, stretched his arms above his head. The crowd roared louder at his every move. To Khaled, it felt like watching a god walk among mortals. The game began. Khaled tried to pay attention, but his eyes stayed locked on Giannis. Every pass, every drive, every block. He saw the rhythm of it all, the same rhythm he had studied for years. The crowd gasped as Giannis spun through two defenders for a dunk. Khaled barely noticed the people around him leaping from their seats. His heart felt like it might collapse under the weight of it. At halftime, a staffer tapped his shoulder. "Come on, it's time." He rose on trembling legs and followed them to the edge of the court. The announcer's voice filled the air again, calling attention to a special segment. The lights dimmed. The jumbotron above the court lit up with a video. Khaled's story began to play. Footage of him as a child, footage from the camp in Lebanon, the dirt court, the wrapped-up bundle he used as a basketball, his voice narrating, "I didn't think I'd ever smile again. Then I saw him. Giannis. I didn't understand the rules, but I understood his story. I understood hope." The crowd quieted. The arena softened, faces turned upward, drawn in. The video continued, shots from Germany, the essay, the training sessions, footage from Athens of Khaled touching the pavement where Giannis once sold sunglasses. Then finally, the moment the invitation arrived, and Khaled now standing here in Milwaukee. The screen faded, the crowd clapped, then stood. The applause grew, not thunderous but deep, respectful, emotional. And then Giannis stood too. Khaled turned, his breath caught. Giannis was walking toward him. Each step felt like a chapter closing. Khaled tried to stay composed, but the tears came. He dropped his head, tried to blink them away, but it was too much. Years of pain and healing, years of dreaming. Now, they condensed into this one impossible moment. Giannis reached out, gently pulled him into a hug. Khaled didn't let go. Neither did Giannis. For several seconds, there was no camera, no crowd, no sound. Just two lives, one that had inspired, one that had survived, intertwined. Giannis leaned down and said something into his ear. Khaled only caught the last part. "You inspired me too, little brother." It broke him. His knees buckled. Giannis held him up. The arena, witnessing it all, erupted. When the game resumed, Khaled barely remembered it. The details blurred. But afterward, backstage, Giannis found him again. They talked, briefly, quietly. Giannis asked about his journey, about his dreams. Khaled answered between deep breaths, overwhelmed by the kindness in his hero's eyes. Giannis handed him a pair of signed shoes. "For your next step," he said. Khaled stared at them, stunned. "I don't know what to say." Giannis smiled. "Just keep going." The next morning, the video of their reunion had gone viral. Headlines around the world captured the moment. From Aleppo to Milwaukee, the boy who found Giannis. Refugee's journey moves NBA star to tears. Social media flooded with comments. Athletes, fans, activists, everyone seemed touched. But Khaled didn't read most of it. He was too busy writing. In the notebook under his first ever entry, he added a new line. "I met him, he saw me, and now I see myself." In the weeks that followed, Khaled trained with the Bucks youth affiliate as part of a mentorship pilot. He took part in coaching clinics. He shared his story with schools, with refugee organizations, with players younger than him. He didn't want fame. He wanted to be a bridge. Back in Germany, he continued school, studied hard, began applying for sports scholarships, volunteered at youth centers. And every Friday evening, he ran a free clinic for refugee kids just arriving in Munich. He wore the shoes Giannis gave him only once, on the first day of the clinic. After that, he put them in a glass box in his room, not to worship, but to remember. Because what Khaled had learned more than anything was this: that we survive because of stories, because of images of people who made it out. And sometimes, if the world is kind, we get to thank them, to show them that their climb gave us the courage to begin our own. Khaled's story wasn't finished, but he no longer felt lost inside it. He was writing it now, step by step, shot by shot, dream by dream. And somewhere in Milwaukee, a man named Giannis smiled, knowing that the boy who once whispered his name in the dark had become something brighter than either of them ever imagined. A light for someone else, a symbol, a brother.